Think about a decision you made recently that you cannot fully explain. Not a small one, a real one, a direction you took or refused to take without knowing exactly why. You had reasons. You always have reasons. But underneath the reasons, there was something older, something that did not come from logic or experience or evidence, something that was already there before you were old enough to question it. By the end of this, you will know exactly where that something came from, and you will never make an unexplained decision in the same unconscious way again. This is not a video about blame. It is not about damage or dysfunction or pointing at the people who raised you as the source of everything that went wrong. Most of them did the best they could. Some of them did not. Either way, that is not the point of this video. The point is this. Every human being arrives in the world with no operating system, no beliefs about what they deserve, no assumptions about how relationships work, no stories about what is possible for someone like them. That operating system gets installed in the first years of life by the people who are simply there, not through dramatic moments, not through the memories you can point to, through repetition, through the 1,000 small daily signals that taught you what love looks like, what safety feels like, what you have to do to be enough, and what happens when you are not. Those signals did not stay in childhood. They became the lens through which you see every room you walk into, every relationship you enter, every opportunity you either reach for or quietly decide is not for someone like you. And the reason most people never see this clearly is because the lens is invisible. You do not experience your conditioning as a set of rules someone else wrote. You experience it as reality, as the way things are, as common sense, as who you simply are. That is the design, not a conspiracy, just the nature of how human beings absorb their environment in the years before the brain develops the capacity to evaluate what it is absorbing. Something was decided about you before you had any say in the matter, and there's a very high probability that you are still living inside that decision right now. Think about the specific ways it shows up, the opportunity that arrived, and something in you immediately calculated whether someone like you was allowed to take it, not whether you were capable, whether you were allowed, or the relationship that felt almost right, but something about being truly seen in it made you pull back, not because the person was wrong, because being fully known by someone carries a risk your nervous system learned about long before you could name it. There's a name for what has been running underneath your decisions. And once you understand the mechanism, you will start to see it operating in every significant choice you have ever made. The first pattern is the worthiness ceiling. Every person raised in an environment where love or approval was conditional learned a specific lesson about what they have to do to deserve good things. And more importantly, what level of good things they are permitted to have. That ceiling is not a thought. It is a felt sense, a physical contraction that arrives the moment something good gets too real, too close, too much like something you might actually have. And then something in you find a way to make it smaller, or make it stop, or make it someone else's fault that it did not work out. The second pattern is the relationship template. The first relationship you ever had taught your nervous system what closeness feels like, what the dynamic between two people feels like at a neurological level. And your brain has been pattern matching every significant relationship against that template ever since. This is why people consistently end up in relationships that feel familiar in ways they cannot explain. Not because they are choosing the same person, because their nervous system is choosing the same feeling. And the feeling of home was installed before they had any choice in what home felt like. The third pattern is the voice. Every person carries an internal narrator, a voice that comments on their decisions, evaluates their worth, predicts their outcomes. Most people experience this voice as their own. It is not entirely their own. Significant portions of it were built from the most repeated voices in their early environment, which means the voice that tells you that you're not ready, that it probably will not work, that people like you do not get to have things like that, is not wisdom. It is an echo, a recording made in an environment you no longer live in, playing on a loop, in a life that has completely changed around it. The fourth pattern is the safety map. Every child maps out what behaviors produce safety and what behaviors produce threat in their specific environment. Speak up and get dismissed. Silence becomes safe. Show emotion and get ridiculed. Emotional suppression becomes safe. Need something and get punished. Having needs becomes dangerous. That map was accurate once. It was a survival tool built for a specific environment that no longer exists. But the nervous system does not automatically update its maps when the environment changes. It keeps running the old routes in new territory, producing results that make no sense to anyone who cannot see the map. So you suppress emotion in relationships where expression would be welcomed. You stay silent in rooms where your voice would change things. You shrink your needs to nothing with people who would have gladly met them. Not because you are broken, because you are running a map that was drawn somewhere else. The fifth pattern is the identity lock. In every family system, roles get assigned. The responsible one, the difficult one, the one who does not cause trouble, the one who holds everything together. These roles are rarely spoken aloud. They are assigned through repeated treatment, and they become the story the person tells about themselves for decades. And the most insidious part of an identity assigned in childhood is that the person will unconsciously organize their entire life to confirm it. Not because they want to, because the brain treats identity as a predictive model. Consistency feels like safety. Change, even positive change, feels like a threat to the model itself. Go back to that decision you thought of at the beginning, the one you could not fully explain. Run it through everything you have just heard. The worthiness ceiling, the relationship template, the inherited voice, the outdated safety map, the assigned identity. Which one was driving that decision, and how long has it been driving decisions like it? Now here is the part that changes everything. None of this is permanent. The brain is not a fixed machine. It is a prediction engine that updates based on new repeated experience, which means the patterns that were installed through repetition can be updated through repetition. Not immediately, not easily, but completely. The update does not start with understanding. Understanding is where it starts to become visible. The update starts with behavior, specifically with the moment you choose a different response than the one the pattern is calling for, and your nervous system survives the choice. Every time you speak when a map says be silent, and nothing catastrophic happens, your nervous system files that as new data. Every time you let someone see you clearly, and they do not leave, the relationship template gets a new entry. Every time you take the opportunity the worthiness ceiling try to block, and you do not collapse under it, the ceiling moves. This is not a fast process. The patterns were built across thousands of repetitions over years. They will not dissolve in a single moment of insight, but they will dissolve because the brain's primary function is accurate prediction. Feed it enough new data, and it will update the model. It has no choice. The mechanism running your unexplained decisions has a name. It is called conditioning, and it is the most powerful invisible force operating in every human life because it does not announce itself. It does not feel like a rule someone else wrote. It feels like you. Conditioning is not trauma in the clinical sense. It does not require neglect or abuse or dramatic failure. It requires only this repeated experience in a formative environment. A parent who expressed love through criticism. A home where achievement was the price of approval. A childhood where being too much or too little produced the same result. Withdrawal of warmth. Ordinary environments produce conditioning. Normal families produce conditioning. Good people with genuine love for their children produce conditioning. Because conditioning is not about intent. It is about repetition. And every environment repeats something. The question is not whether you were conditioned. You were. Every person alive was. The question is whether the conditioning you received is still the right operating system for the life you're trying to build right now. Because here's what becomes visible once you start looking. The ceiling that feels like reality is the height of someone else's reach. The voice that sounds like wisdom is the echo of someone else's fear. The template that feels like love is the shape of someone else's limitations. You did not choose any of it, but you're choosing now. Every day you run the old patterns without questioning them is a choice. Not a conscious one, but a choice. And the moment you bring it into conscious awareness, it becomes a different kind of choice entirely. The first practical step is to identify your specific ceiling. Not in theory, specifically. What is the exact level of success, visibility, love, or achievement where something in you reliably starts to sabotage or retreat? That level is data. It is showing you the precise height of the worthiness ceiling that was installed in your specific environment. The second step is to locate the voice. Pick a recurring negative belief you hold about yourself. Something you have thought so many times it feels like fact. Now ask honestly, whose voice does that belief sound like? Not metaphorically, literally. Whose cadence, whose phrasing, whose emotional register does that thought carry? Because it did not originate in you. It was delivered to you, repeatedly, until it became indistinguishable from your own thinking. The third step is to map one relationship pattern. Look at the last 3 significant relationships in your life: romantic, friendship, or professional. What feeling do they have in common? Not what the person was like. What it felt like to be in proximity to them. That feeling is the template. And the template tells you exactly what your nervous system was taught to call home. The fourth step is the hardest and the most important. You have to grieve the childhood you needed and did not get. Not dramatically, not with blame, but honestly, because until you grieve it, you will keep trying to get it from the adults in your current life. From partners who cannot be parents. From friendships that cannot carry that weight. From achievements that cannot fill that specific space. The grief is not weakness. It is the thing that finally lets you stop looking in the wrong places. The fifth step is to introduce one deliberate contradiction to the pattern every day. One moment where you speak instead of going silent. One moment where you take up space instead of shrinking. One moment where you let someone see something real instead of the edited version. Not a transform. The people who break conditioning fastest are not the ones with the most insight. They are the ones who act before they feel ready. Who move before the voice finishes its sentence. Who take the opportunity before the worthiness ceiling has time to calculate whether they are allowed. Because the voice gets slower as the contradictions accumulate. The ceiling rises with each unreinforced limit. The template updates with each relationship that does not follow the expected script. Not because the person forced it, because they stopped confirming the old prediction. And at some point something shifts. The unexplained decisions start to feel different. Not because the conditioning disappeared, but because a new layer has been built on top of it. A layer made of chosen responses rather than inherited ones. A layer that represents who you actually are, rather than who someone else's environment decided you should be. Here is the part that most people resist. The people who conditioned you are not villains. Most of them were running their own inherited programming, passing on what was passed to them, operating inside their own worthiness ceilings, echoing voices that were echoed to them. The chain goes back further than any single person in it. Understanding that does not erase the impact. The impact is real regardless of intent, but it changes what you do with it. Because if the people who raised you were themselves conditioned, then what they installed in you is not a verdict on your worth. It was the limit of their own vision. And their limit is not your ceiling. The most important thing to understand about inherited conditioning is this. It was designed for their world, the world they grew up in, the threats they faced, the resources they had access to, the version of life that made sense in their specific time and environment. You are living in a completely different world, running their operating system, on your hardware, in conditions it was never designed for. No wonder things feel stuck. No wonder the effort does not match the output. No wonder the decisions keep producing familiar results in completely new situations. The system is not broken. It is running the wrong program. And the only person who can install a new one is you. The update begins the moment you stop experiencing your patterns as personality and start experiencing them as programming. Not to remove responsibility, to locate it correctly, because you cannot change what you believe is simply who you are. But you can change a program. Once you can see it running, and you can see it running now. The worthiness ceiling, the inherited voice, the relationship template, the outdated safety map, the assigned identity. You can see all of it, which means you're already standing outside the program for the first time, looking at it instead of through it. Go back to the person who raised you, not with anger, not with grief right now, just with clarity. See them as a person who is themselves shaped by forces they did not choose, passing on a program they did not know they were running, to someone who deserved an operating system built for their own life, not inherited from someone else's survival. They gave you what they had. In many cases, they gave you more than they had. And some of what they gave you is genuinely yours. Values, resilience, ways of loving that are worth keeping. The work is not to delete everything. It is to audit, to decide consciously what you carry forward and what you finally set down. Because you have been carrying some of it for a very long time. Decisions that were not really yours. Ceilings that were not really yours. Voices that were never really yours. A version of yourself built to fit an environment that no longer exists, being worn into every new room you enter. That version kept you safe once. It served its purpose completely. It got you here, but here is not there. And the person you are capable of becoming does not fit inside the shape that was decided for you before you were old enough to decide anything for yourself. The decisions you make from this point forward do not have to be explained by your history. They can be made by the person who exists now, with the awareness you have now, with the evidence of your own capability that has been accumulating in every moment you moved forward, despite the voice, despite the ceiling, despite the program running underneath it all. Go back to that decision, the one you thought of at the very beginning. You cannot explain it then. You can explain it now. And the moment you can explain it is the moment it finally loses its power over you. So think about it one more time, because this time, it is actually you doing the thinking.